Good evening, everyone. I'm Kubrali, and you're watching Awaz News. Tonight, I'll be taking you to top news across Canada.
Victims of Rainbow Bridge crash identified as American couple. Terrifying, Ford says tougher penalties needed to keep auto thieves behind bars. Some home decorators collection artificial Christmas trees recalled over fire risk. Ottawa giving Peel Region $7 million for reception center and shelter for refugees and asylum seekers. 57-year-old motorcyclist deceased following collision in Clarington. Trudeau accuses Tories of turning their backs on Ukraine's needs, announces more aid.
These were the headlines, and now let's go through the details.
The two people who were killed in Wednesday's crash at the Rainbow Bridge border crossing have been identified as a married couple. In a press release issued on Friday, the Niagara Falls Police Department said the occupants of the vehicle that caught on fire are 53-year-old Kurt P. Villani and his wife, 53-year-old Monica Villani, both of Grand Island, New York. The incident is still under investigation by the Niagara Falls Police Department's Crash Management Unit. No further details about the crash have been released. Video of the incident shows a white car traveling at a high rate of speed before hitting a median and flying into the air before crashing down. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said the car and border crossing booth burst into flames following the incident. You actually had to look at and say, was this generated by all? Because it was so surreal to see how high in the air this vehicle went. And then the crash and explosion and the fire, Hochul said on Wednesday. The federal government says it will provide $7 million to Peel Region to help create a permanent welcome center to process refugees and asylum seekers. Ministry of Diversity, Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities, Kamal Khera, made the announcement on behalf of Immigration Minister Mark Miller Friday. As winter approaches and with a global migration crisis, it is even more important to ensure people are kept safe, Khera said. This new reception center will save lives and alleviate pressure on the region of Peel. There is no simple answer, but we are confident that with full engagement from all levels of government, we can implement real long-term, sustainable and compassionate measures to ensure that the most vulnerable newcomers to Canada have a roof over their heads. The facility will serve as both a reception center and a temporary shelter and will be operated in partnership with community organizations with the right skill set to help those who arrive. GTA municipalities have been calling for federal government to do more to care for refugees and asylum seekers as overflowing shelter systems around the GTA struggle to keep up with demand for spots. A welcome center near Pearson International Airport to help match them with appropriate services and shelter space was one of the asks from a meeting of the big city mayors. For many asylum seekers, the next stop after asking for asylum at the airport is a shelter intake center in Toronto or other GTA municipalities. Earlier this year, scores of refugees ended up sleeping on the streets outside a downtown shelter intake center in Toronto after the city said it would start referring asylum seekers to federal programs because it couldn't keep up with the demand. Last week, the death of an asylum seeker camped outside of a former Peel Region shelter prompted Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown to say that it was beyond comprehension that the situation had been allowed to go so bad. Speaking at the announcement Friday, he praised the federal government for fast-tracking its response in the wake of last week's events. He added that, having been in government before at the federal level, he appreciates how much effort is involved to make things move quickly. With the weather getting colder, advocates have said the situation is becoming more urgent. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow also welcomed the news of the funding for reception center Friday, but said much more is needed. Chow had a back and forth on Twitter earlier this week with Miller over the issue. To the province, the city has asked the federal government to open up the armories used by the Ministry of Defense at Fort York and Moss Park in order to help shelter people. However, Minister of Defense Bill Blair said Thursday that the space is needed for training and armories and that its use as shelter space would not be appropriate. Kara reiterated Friday that $5 million remains on the table to help the city utilize the Better Living Center for the unhoused population. However, Chow said Thursday that the city was already in the process of opening the facility as a warming center with 200 spots and said it did little to help increase shelter space in the city. Police have released a new video showing the pursuit of a stolen vehicle following an armed carjacking in Brampton on Thursday afternoon. The victim, a 43-year-old man, met with the suspects at around 2 p.m. in a parking lot in a Biscayne Crescent and First Gulf Boulevard area in Brampton. Police say that the victim intended to sell his 2022 Mercedes G-Wagon, but when he arrived, he was confronted by the two suspects, one of whom allegedly produced a handgun and demanded his keys. Police said the victim complied, at which point one of the suspects fled the scene in his vehicle. The second suspect followed in an F-150 truck. Police tracked the vehicles to Western Road and Highway 401 where they met with the F-150 truck. Officers were able to take the occupants of the F-150 truck into custody. Police say that the officers attempted to stop the G-Wagon, but the driver made contact with a police vehicle and then sped off. Police kept helicopter surveillance on the G-Wagon vehicle as it fled the scene. In the video released by police, it can be seen speeding through stop signs and narrowly evading oncoming traffic and other vehicles. An officer can be heard saying hiding his speed, ignoring stop signs in the video. Police say that the driver of the G-Wagon soon after got out of the vehicle and fled on foot before committing a second carjacking and stealing a white Honda Odyssey van. That suspect remains outstanding, and in the news release, police said that further arrests are anticipated. The two suspects who are arrested by police are 19-year-old Naman Singh of Brampton and 27-year-old Henry Pazer of Mississauga. Singh is charged with robbery, while Pazer is charged with possession of property obtained by crime. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned the Conservatives on Friday for voting against a bill to implement a free trade agreement with Ukraine, accusing them of turning their backs on the embattled country's needs for partisan reasons. I have actually boasted that it's not a political debate in Canada. All parties in Canada stand with Ukraine, Trudeau said at the Canada-EU summit in St. John's on Friday. So it is particularly troubling to see that suddenly the Conservative Party of Canada would choose to not stand with Ukraine, something that they need. He noted there has been a rise in right-wing rhetoric in the United States and in some parts of Europe, where some political leaders have called for their countries to pull back on aid for Ukraine nearly 2 years into the war. In the House of Commons this week, Conservative MPs voted against a bill to implement a negotiated update to an existing trade deal between Canada and Ukraine, touching off a heated debate. Tory leader Pierre Poilievre has insisted that they were rejecting the legislation because it promotes carbon pricing, which he said has been devastating for the Canadian economy, and not voting against the trade deal itself. The deal, which is based on an agreement made under the former Conservative government, focuses on market access and includes provisions aimed at helping Ukraine eventually rebuild. An additional environmental chapter being debated in the House of Commons includes language that says both countries agree to promote carbon pricing. We bought in the free trade agreement. We voted against Justin Trudeau forcing a carbon tax into that pre-existing agreement, Poilievre told reporters on Thursday. Canada's chief trade negotiator has said the language around carbon pricing is meant to clarify that such policies won't hamper bilateral commerce. Ukraine has had a price on carbon since 2011, and the country's ambassador is urging Canada to pass legislation. Canada announced another $60 million contribution of military aid for Ukraine Friday, including 9 million rounds of ammunition and around 11,000 firearms. That's part of a $500 million package of aid that was announced during the summer. Canada has committed more than $2.4 billion in military assistance to Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion of the country began in February 2022. South border Republicans have resisted calls for more help from President Joe Biden in recent months. The White House has been pressing lawmakers to pass a nearly $106 billion emergency spending package that includes more than $61 billion for Ukraine. GOP lawmakers on Capitol Hill have been arguing the money would be better spent on domestic priorities. Congress ignored a roughly $40 billion supplemental request before a September 30 funding deadline. Then last week it passed a stopgap funding measures that keeps the government operating through early next year, but with no additional Ukraine aid. The United States has committed more than $60 billion in aid to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, including more than $43 billion in military aid. The poll of 1,239 adults was conducted November 2 to 6 using a sample drawn from NORC's probability-based AmeriSpeak panel, designed to represent the U.S. population. The margin of error was plus or minus 3.9 percentage points. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is calling for tougher penalties and bail requirements for criminals accused of stealing vehicles using increasingly brazen means. They have gone from carjacking and stealing cars in the middle night to kicking people's doors in, and that's when you cross the line, Ford said when asked about the rise in auto thefts. He said he wants the federal government to boost the number of Canadian Border Services officers on the front lines to deal with the border aspect of vehicle thefts, and added that more needs to be done to make sure that offenders are not freed quickly. The event was held to highlight Mississauga's share of a previously announced provincial program to combat vehicle theft. The Preventing Auto Theft grant is providing $18 million to help fund 21 projects over 3 years with the aim of bolstering efforts to combat vehicle thefts. Ontario has seen a surge in auto thefts over the past few years, with a 72% increase from 2014 to 2021. According to the province, a vehicle is stolen in Ontario every 14 minutes. Thieves and criminal networks have specifically targeted the Greater Toronto Area, according to the province, with Toronto seeing an 81% increase in auto theft for 2014 to 2021 and a 78% increase in violent carjackings from 2021 to 2022. Mississauga Police Chief Nishan Duraipa spoke alongside Ford Friday and said there are multiple reasons for the drastic increase, including the post-COVID supply chain problems and chip shortages for new vehicles, as well as increasingly sophisticated and aggressive theft tactics. Right now, the risk-reward for stealing a vehicle and the effortless ability to get it on a cargo container or get it fraudulently resold here domestically or used for their criminal activity is so great, and within minutes it's gone, Duraipa said. The fact that people are aware that it's that easy and that, it is seen at the lowest level as just the theft of a property is part of the issue. It is actually funding right behind drugs and fraud as the largest source of organized crime internationally.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Kubra Ali. I'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Until then, good night.